Hello. Okay, this will likely be a fairly long video, but I'm going to break it up into two categories, like the kilts, except this time it'll just be budget and premium. There's not a ton of middle ground to really worry about. Now, when you first get into the whole idea of wearing a kilt, you're probably buying an inexpensive kilt, and so a $200 accessory is just going to seem ridiculous. And unless you're really going to stick with it, I guess that's a valid place to start. When I began, like I said in video way back when, I was kind of flying blind and just buying whatever looked good on Amazon. Uh, since I was starting with an acrylic kilt, I went through and bought a couple other acrylic kilts, and so I was just trying to buy flashes that would kind of match. So if you don't know what flashes are, it's these little wing deals that go on your socks to hold up your socks or to look presentable. They usually come with elastic. Some bands are more comfortable than others. Purists insist that if you're going to be wearing a kilt often, that you should replace these with non-elastic so you don't have varicose veins and other issues. But if you're only wearing a kilt 2 or 3 times a year, it's not probably going to kill you. So it will depend. Uh, Obviously, black watch, if you're covering most of it with your hose, nobody's going to know what tartan it is. So you can get, a solid color or, a generic tartan and kind of get away with it. I had, red. It don't look that red in this lighting, but it's red. It's actually brick red. And then nicer ones with the little extra flags, yellow. These are longer though, so they'll show more. So if you're one of those guys who only really wants to show a tiny bit of flash, you might want to trim them and just kind of follow the contours. Most of them, you'll try and match a tartan. Here's a tartan I don't own, but I thought again that if I'm covering most of this, nobody would know because I have a gray kind of kilt that I don't wear very much, and these were just going to be my backup flashes for that I haven't used. And again, really long, way longer than I typically like to show up my flashes. And then these ugly ones that did not match the color of the nicer kilt at all. But again, with the little flag deal, which I, again, kind of prefer to just this kind of flat chevron. So and then of course, but then you get into problems with certain companies and certain tartans where you have this flash is supposed to match this flash, and it's like, okay, I see where the yellow stripe is the same on horizontal, but then on vertical we have an issue and they look terrible, and I have to try and I actually took a black felt marker and tried to color over this so it would show less so they would match better, and it didn't really work that well because it's acrylic material, so it didn't take the ink. I ended up getting a refund on these, and he said just keep them. So fine, I wear them, when I'm doing something where I really don't want to look presentable and don't care, and nobody's scrutinizing me at all. And they varied in price from like $8 to $15 a pair or something. So yeah, they add up if you buy too many at once, kind of thing. But if you kind of buy a few here and a few there, like I said, I was trying to match 20 cheap kilts or something at one point, and so I ended up with a bunch of extra ones. And they serve no other actual purpose whatsoever. Some of them will have, they're in the baggie, more complicated clip thingies, which I actually like less than just this Velcro. Yeah, this metal kind of sticks into you a little bit, but it's just Velcro. It's easy. So that's that. I might replace some of my better flashes with those straps later on, mix and match, that kind of thing. How long they take to stretch out, I don't know, because I can I have enough that I can kind of vary them up that they're not, all stretched out yet, so I have no idea. So the next The next thing down, I guess, typically is, well, we'll just kind of go from cheaper to more expensive, maybe, I don't know, is the kilt pin. So the kilt pin originally was, kind of an army blanket, kind of horse pin, and then that turned into kind of this safety pin deal. You can see the bottom there. And I got some in chrome from, I don't know, my cousin's old Irish dancing skirt or something. And these ones I found in like a set of 10 or something. Um, a lot of guys don't like poking holes in their kilts, especially if it's a better quality kilt. Obviously, an acrylic kilt, it's not going to matter. It's not going to add enough weight to really hold it down, but it's kind of a security thing, and it gives it a little look like, hey, I did this on purpose. So sometimes I will wear just these, and the only thing about it is, yeah, this literally will work its way into the weave of the fabric, and it can get caught in here, especially if it's a really loose weave. Really cheap acrylic kilt, you're going to have more issues with this than with a pokey kind of acrylic, or sorry, a fasten through backing pin. Let's say it that way. So, like for example, these, which I have almost a dozen of cheap ones like this in various patterns, where I got almost all of them in the bronze color instead of the chrome color. You can kind of see that. And, it's pretty straightforward, just fastening it through. It's the kind of thing you want to do the night before, so you have it placed perfectly, so it's not all bunched up or it's not in the wrong spot on the tartan or this or that, or you find out walking around with it, hits your leg in some weird way or something. Um, but when I first started, I kind of had this notion of like chrome for formal and bronze for not formal, but I also had this notion of trying to match themes. So the issues you come into a lot of times is, you'll find the pin in the one color and you'll find the matching Sporran decal in a different color. And so you'll be like, oh, but I wanted this color with that color, da 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 da, and that will drive you insane. I'll talk about Sporrans more in a minute. But yeah, the pin is just a decoration. There's no super practical use for it. Like I said, a lot of guys won't put them on their kilts. Uh, in the premium kilt videos, Robert McDonald always talks about, if you are going to use a kilt pin, leave it in, don't take it out. You'll just wear holes. In a budget kilt, chances are I'm putting in the washing machine, so I'm taking it out before I wash it. Unless I forget, because I'm sure I've left these in to wash before, but it hasn't done any significant damage to a really cheap fabric, so not really an issue. So related to that is then the brooch. Now the brooch is something you think you need, and you want the matching color, and they come in chrome or this, or they come in more fancy versions, which again, that will be in the next video. The problem with the brooch is it's meant to be mostly a fancy item, so buying a cheap one is kind of anathema to the whole principle of the thing, because basically this is a wedding ornament for your plaid plate that's supposed to hold the fabric here secure so it doesn't fall out your jacket. So people try to incorporate this in other places, as a lapel pin or a kilt pin or something. It's a little too big for that. It's too big for a hat badge. It's too small for I don't know, a hubcap. I think somebody made that joke once. But they look cool, so you end up buying a couple of match just and what they are more practical for, and you can use either of these, is if you're doing a great kilt where you're bunching your fabric. This will actually work. It just won't look as stylish. So if you get into more of that kind of, I'll talk about it more in the costumey video that I'll do eventually. If you're doing it as more of a costumey angle, then a nice brooch or even a cheap one. The basic themes. I'm only showing a couple of them. I think there's about half a dozen that are pretty standard. There's the stag, the lion, the thistle. If you don't know what a thistle is, I don't have any of the lion stuff here right now, but the rampant lion and a couple configurations. Those are kind of the three main Scottish emblems, and then the two Irish emblems are, you know, the shamrock and the harp. And I don't have any of the harp stuff here right now either. If you don't know what a harp is, it's a musical instrument. But yeah, so like typically you can coordinate and you can get the emblems that match. This is pretty evident to anybody who's ever done any accessory shopping at all, but in case you haven't. And then of course there's, well, as I was showing, there's plain front this with ornament here, or there's a little bit more. This one actually has a rabbit fur, so that's what they want to call a semi-dress Sporran, even though it's still an inexpensive Sporran. Am I at Sporrans yet? I guess. I don't think anybody's gonna have too many questions about emblems that I won't be able to revisit. So yeah, here's this one, and then I have kind of an Irish one that's, I think, from the exact same company. It has the same fur. You can't really see it, but a big gaudy shamrock because the heart probably wasn't available. And I haven't worn that one yet, but what to say? I mean, yeah, this is mostly going to be Pakistani leather. You can find it in, you know, typically brown and black. Again, when I first started out, I was, you know, pretty sure that black was more formal and brown was more rustic. So I have, I don't know, some brown stuff, but brown stuff is a little harder to find of stuff that I actually like, whereas black stuff's a little easier. Black's a little more forgiving with most tartans because most tartans have black in it, whereas the brown stuff tones better with certain tartans, maybe doesn't quite match other ones as well. You know, I don't think brown looks so good with Royal Stewart. Your results may vary. Usually it has this kind of gusset thing. You clip your chain into this. Now, different companies will have different things. So I had one that kind of broke, and I asked one company to send me a doohickey to replace this doohickey, and the doohickey they sent me was like, I don't know, for a baby or something. It was so small I couldn't even fit it through this gusset or whatever you call this. And so that didn't work. So then I called another company, and they sent me this really long one, which works okay in an emergency, but is kind of thick to slide through here and wider, so you have to adjust your chain. But at least I have an emergency one if I need it, because junk like this. This one's decent. It's riveted. I've had other ones where it was not so secure and glued and things like that. So you really want to kind of check what you're getting, reinforce it if necessary, see if it's compatible with your other items, that kind of thing. Again, this is the exact same thing, but they'll usually have a pretty generic snap. Some work better than others. I've had some where it's like, you know, you want to bring a hammer to try and close your Sporran. Most of them are not that bad. The chains, on the other hand, yeah, a lot of people have complained that these will, you know, cut into your kilt and saw holes eventually. This one had a little thing to hold this down with this, and it fell off, and who knows where that went. And this is the back of the one I was just holding up, and it only has a single rivet instead of a double rivet. So eventually this might give me trouble. The worst one I had was this whole end got distended and elongated and pulled out of shape on one of them, which I think is why I ended up with this. And it didn't end up ripping, but the D ring would want to come out, you know, stuff like that. You're just dealing with low quality stuff. I had one that literally smelled like urine, like they had probably cured the hide with, you know, literally goat urine or something. And I had to leave that one outside for like 3 days till the smell wasn't so pungent that I could actually bring it in. These adjuster strap things, they're not too terrible over the course of the day. The holes aren't always exactly where you want them to be. You know, your results may vary. There's no real way to adjust the chain, unfortunately, unless you're really good at, you know, getting this thing off and removing links or something. These things are absolute garbage. They never hold their shape. They, you know, they want to come undone. This thing wants to pop out. This will get caught on your fabric, especially if you have an open weave fabric. If you're going to the bathroom and you move your sporran and this and that, all of a sudden everything's a hassle. These love to get caught on the belt loops, and when you're trying in a hurry to get out the door, they love to snag. There's a pain in this. This one, bonus, it has two instead of just one. Most of them will just be attached here. So this one has twice as many problems as the chain with only one disaster end thingy. So typically, when you buy a cheap sporran, the first thing you want to do is turn around and buy a better sporran chain and just suck it up and have this one in the car in case that one malfunctions, and just wear the good one almost always. But I don't follow that rule as often as I should. I still wear these until they kind of break and wear out. The other option that certain companies have offered is key fobs that they call sporran hangers. These are the USA Kilts ones. I tried the UT Kilts ones and they were horrible because they mixed this with a chain. So the sporran hung down to my knees and I had to return them immediately because I didn't feel like figuring out how to remove the chain and all that. They weren't super expensive, so if you like the look of them and you know you want a little project and you know want to mess with it, then go ahead. But I've tried these, I think, once. I wasn't as enthusiastic as I thought I was going to be. If I had to go to, say, like the airport or court or something, and I didn't want the metal chain, I might opt for this. But, and we'll talk about belts in a minute, with most kilt outfits, I'm not wearing the belt, which is the other accessory that you start off thinking you're going to need. And I have like half a dozen of them. And uh, yeah, I wear them very seldom compared to what I thought I would wear. The other type of sporran in this same price range. The dress sporran, I didn't bring all 80,000 dress sporran options I could. This one has, again, I think probably rabbit fur. Sometimes you'll find a cow. Like, again, kind of a cheap chrome, not the nicest kind of pewter thing, but if you're again doing something semi-formal where nobody's going to know the difference. I think a lot of people like to wear these. I think if you wear this to a casual event, it's because you don't know better. They do hold a little bit more, but they're just over the top in design. So that should be a dead giveaway that this is not a festival piece. But they do, some of them do look good with tweed. So if you're kind of, like I said, if you're kind of semi-formal and a bit dressed up, I think I have photos in the other album where I am wearing that with still an inexpensive kilt, but a nice jacket kind of thing. And you can get away with it, but it's not meant to be done. But no logo on that. Some of them will still have a logo. Some of them will still have a shamrock, or I show it in case you forgot what a shamrock is. That kind of thing. Well, and again, uh, yeah, some of them will have the thistle. Some of them will have, what do you call it? Oh, but the other thing I wanted to show before I get off track, see this chain, the rivet itself actually busted. So even though this is a pretty thick, durable leather, the rivet here broke right when I was going to put it on. So I need to find a leather guy who can re-rivet that for me. And but overall, I mean, I've worn this a fair amount of time, and the leather is in pretty decent shape for a pretty cheap chain. Oh, here it is. Yeah, see, but you can see where this is all tweaked out of orbit, and so the D ring is wanting to not stay where it's supposed to. and there's a notch, so this thing literally wants to slide out through the D-ring while I'm wearing it, which is not how it's supposed to go. And see how easily that came off without even trying. So yeah, but this is the kind of chain that comes with a Sporran, so you're kind of at their mercy. And that will bring us to belts and buckles. Okay, so for starters, again, there's embossed ones, and then there's not embossed ones. This one's a pretty thin leather. When I first started buying them, the leather was actually really thick, and the Velcro would kind of run the length of them. In the last 5 years or so, they've gotten a little chintzier with the Velcro, but a little more size specific. So some brands a large will still fit me, and most brands I want to get an extra large. Again, I decided that bronze looked better with brown, and chrome, which I'll show you in a second. Chrome looked better with black. Again, when I was buying a lot of the chrome stuff, it's because I thought it was formal. But then it turns out that if you're wearing a full formal outfit, you're not wearing a belt anyway. If you're wearing any kind of vest, you're typically not wearing a belt anyway. If you're wearing a sweater, you might be wearing a belt, but nobody's going to see it. So here's a non-embossed version, which again, I thought the embossed ones were maybe fancier, and then realized that they're actually technically kind of less fancy because it's more ornate. Another variation on the kind of thistle theme. So I just have a couple that I tend to leave the buckles in, and that way, if I know which kilt I'm wearing, I know how they're adjusted, because some of the kilts are bulkier than others. So that's kind of my excuse for having extra belts, is mostly just because the adjusting the belt doesn't take that long. But again, if you're in a hurry, you're trying to get out the door and you kind of coordinated in advance, okay, I know this belt I can just put on with this kilt. And like I said, when you're coming home in the car on the way home, if your kilt starts to kind of sag down, you click your belt back on and you're good to go. And then buckles, like I said, you can find gaudier ones. Again, the shamrock, again, the thistle. The stag, the lion, the harp, and the lion, the witch, and the wardrobe. And so here we have a detailed one in black. You'll find, different versions, and a plain one in black. And again, here's the buckle that's supposed to match those thistles. And not the nicest buckles, but again, for very casual affairs. They used to come in sets with the belt and the buckle, but I don't know if everybody still does that. I haven't seen it much lately. Before I get into another segment, I guess we'll do the shoes. Now, these are meant to be more semi-formal shoes, but occasionally you'll see guys wearing them at a festival. They're not super comfortable for that. If you're going to buy the Piper ones with the nice soles, then they're going to cost way more, and they're going to fit hopefully less hit or miss, but meant for all day comfort. These are, probably pretty cheap leather, pretty basic outsole. Mostly I use this kind of thing for Christmas, not much else. I don't wear these to festivals, but I found a couple pairs one year. Peterman was having a kilt thing, and all the kilts had already been bought up. All they had pretty much left was like hose, flashes, and shoes. So I got a couple of pairs of the shoes just to have them. And they were marked way down from whatever they usually go for. So it was like, okay, fine. And they're probably the wrong size. I think the half size, it's one of those things because it doesn't have a tongue and it's not kind of a normal tying structure. Some of them, like, they're going to fit more comfortably, but then you might be sliding around in them. But if they're tight, then they're tight. So, and because I'm not used to wearing, the kilt hose versus athletic socks, it kind of puts a different feel to it, so your results may vary. So again, you might want to try 2 different sizes and see which one suits you better. But at the end of the day, they're still, pretty much cheap shoes. Okay, so part two. That, like I said, this video is kind of long, but I do want to talk about headwear a little bit here, rather than doing a whole separate video, and tied into that, literally, is neckwear. I didn't, get every single item out, but okay, so obviously there's acrylic tartan ties, which are not as terrible as you might think. I mean, again, if you're just, doing kind of a casual look and you're, doing, cheap flashes and you're not really, worried about it, but you want to look kind of dressy, they're like, I don't know, 15, $20, I hope. I have some kilts that go okay. This is like a polyester tie. I mean, so I have a tartan that kind of goes with this pretty well. So rather than trying to match every single kilt with every single tartan tie, that can become a nuisance and can look. Some people think that looks too matchy and too silly. Um, I just think that some just work better than others because, again, back to these ugly flashes, whereas the kilt was even darker than this tie. So you're trying to put a halfway decent wool tie with acrylic flashes. At least it's the flashes. Nobody's really going to see it. And at least the tie went pretty well with the kilt. And oh, okay, yeah, this is a semi-reputable brand. But so this is a real Scottish tie, just not an expensive one. So this, yeah, same company, Ingalls, Buchan, or whatever. They will have, this is like a fairly lightweight, but it is wool. I think this is 11 ounce. And so again, I got these on clearance for like $15 because instead of buying swatches, I thought I would buy ties. I may have explained this in the previous video. I don't recall. And so I thought, well, let's see, what does this, and then I can always wear it later on itself. So here's another one that came out sooner or later than the other one, same exact brand. Very lightweight, very inexpensive. So it's like, okay, well, the swatch is $9 and a tie is like 15. I'll just buy some ties and see how they look. The problem is not all the mills use the exact same colors, and the set sizes can be different, and da da da. So you have a devil of a time trying to match a kilt to a tie, which is backwards. You should be trying to match the $15 item to the expensive item, not the expensive item to the cheap item. So like I said, a lot of times I will end up just not being able to really wear this tie with the kilt when I wanted to, because a plain color tie will just look better than a tie that totally clashes. The tartans look stupid together. Obviously, it's pretty easy to find. I don't have any right here, but Black Watch stuff, pretty available, pretty cheap. And similar to that is, the Royal Stewart. These aren't Scottish companies. This is like Paul Frederick and Amazon. So obviously a Paul Frederick tie costs a little bit more, and every year they offer different tartans. But I have a cheaper one of this that goes better or worse with the hat. I forget. It's around here somewhere. And so, but the problem here is now you've upgraded into a silk tie, and a lot of people will say a silk tie looks too shiny for the wool of the kilt. This is a flat cap, not a traditional, Scottish cap, but a lot of guys consider them kind of interchangeable now. Some will also say berets, depending on the, how military the beret looks or how fashiony you want to be about it instead of traditional looking. Similar, here's another Paul Frederick tie that I got. And then I saw this hat that I thought, oh, they match. And they match pretty well. Turns out, but they're not the exact same tartan. One's McLeod and one's Farquharson or something. But you can't tell from, more than 3 feet away at least. But they don't look that great with a kilt. They look pretty good together, but the kilt tartan is so much bigger that, usually people want something, where they feel like, yes, I'm really showing off. This, of course, is an acrylic bonnet that is, again, better discussed in the costumey video, but there are flat caps that will come with a larger set size and a heavier weight. This is probably not even wool. 40%. Huh, there you go. So whereas this is not wool at all, but a wool version of this, which I will talk about in the next video, with a larger set size will look slightly better with the kilt, if that's the way you're going. And I didn't bring out the felt more. What do you call it? Well, these are meant to be more like the tam with the the dealy bopper at the top there, and the this one just has an elastic band, but the more elaborate ones have a felt crown. I think crown would be the right term. Kind of a headband, and then you'll have the motorboard effect for the military, but civilians wear them too, and so you'll have that's called a Balmoral hat, whereas this is just basic tam o'shanter. And this has no ornamentation, so this is a bonnet. Again, this is going to look a little more costumey, but it depends. Again, I have that other vest from the previous video that this actually matches pretty well with, if I am in the mood. But the other ones typically come in black felt. For the really cheap ones, you're only going to find black. I don't think you're going to find an array of colors. And you'll usually have the red pom pom at the top. And yeah, they're like $20, but they'll make your head sweat a lot more than uh, you know some of these others. If I'm going to an all day festival, I'm wearing a Gandalf brim hat. I don't care. I'm not I'm not trying to worry about my headwear as much as keep the sun off my face. So I guess that's about it for hats and ties.